All right, so last but definitely not least, we're gonna switch it up a little bit and talk about data. So I think we're at the point as an industry where everybody understands that data is critical. It's super important to understand what's going on. It's super important to measure everything, but it's also super scary. So I think we're at the point where like we all want to utilize data to grow our games, but we just don't really fully know how. So we end up working with maybe too complicated things. So hopefully Oliver will kind of enlighten us a little bit and tell us why you should not be afraid of data and how to actually make it accessible. So please welcome Oliver Kern, who I would describe as a marketing guru. Maybe that's a good term. Yeah, please welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. So first of all, I am not a data scientist. I'm not even, I wouldn't consider myself even as any kind of techie or geek or anything like that. I use data. I try to use a lot of data, and for me, the last few years have been a very interesting learning curve. And I'm a marketer by heart. That's what I care about. I help companies grow. And it's become clearer and clearer that all the data that is captured, that there is a lot of value in that. Where I started kind of my career probably somewhere in the online world, and already then it was like, okay, whoever kind of owns the user and the data that is kind of connected to that user is actually on a winning streak. And I think many game developers definitely underestimate the power that they have actually when they capture data. So yeah, as I said, I help with growth. I'm currently Chief Commercial Officer at Lockwood Publishing. I've worked with lots of companies and have done a lot of consulting, helped companies on user acquisition, marketing strategies, marketing operations, structure around those kind of things. It's a fun ride, but what I really care about is really great games and helping these companies to grow. So one of the most important things is if you don't own your data, if you don't own the data, then you cannot win. I would argue that probably out of, let's say, the top 500 publishers, at least 95% of these actually really care about all the data that they can capture and actually really try to make the most of it. It is very much so about capturing everything, and equally important, not to share everything with everybody. So you know, people are always in the app developer space open to somebody who says like, oh yeah, please integrate this SDK here and this SDK there. What you're doing is you're also then sharing possibly a lot of data, and you need to be very mindful about what you're actually giving to whom and what these companies are doing. The main thing, though, is really to make sure that you own all that data and that you actually have also access to it. So if I look at kind of the marketing tech stack, it all started off with basically we had no tools, we had nothing. So we started trying to do kind of some advertising, and we're then looking at, okay, can this somehow work? Then quite a while ago we started looking at, okay, somehow we need somebody to help us actually attribute this advertising and the installs that result of that. And that was kind of the first wave where, you know, companies like Tune grew massively, where people started to realize, okay, so somehow we need to attribute our advertising spend to actually see if this actually performs on the various channels. And what then sometimes even quite large teams used to do is they then ran lots of spreadsheets and kind of looked at all that information. You know, how much are we spending and how many installs are we getting? At some point, people started to realize, okay, well, that's actually not exactly enough, because it's not only about the install. It's not, it was the golden times of kind of the incentivized installs, and people started to realize, okay, maybe there is a little bit more to it than just the cost per install. Actually, we do want to get users in that actually then also generate revenue. So we started looking at kind of cohorts of users on specific channels, and started to kind of measure the ROI. Everything extremely manual, and kind of some of the bigger game publishers still have quite large teams that at that time definitely spent a lot of their time actually just taking numbers from all sorts of sources and putting them all in lovely Excel spreadsheets. This is really changing rapidly towards solutions where people actually are kind of capturing all that data in data warehouses. And that sounds, for many developers, like scary. It's extremely costly. You probably need lots of engineers, somebody to kind of maintain all that. Yeah, I'm not so sure about it. Well, I mean, if I can do it, and as I said, I'm not any kind of data scientist or anything like that. If I can do it, I would argue that all the smart developers can do it as well. So, in kind of a picture maybe. So yeah, what started was, as I already explained, you have this app. We integrated some kind of install attribution, and that information basically dictated, which marketing campaigns were actually running and successful or not. Very separately, we had like in-game analytics. There are some very nice off-the-shelf tools. A lot of people also develop their own stuff. And then we had, some companies providing kind of CRM solutions, etc. There are also, obviously, some companies that try to do a lot of everything. I personally am more a fan of being clean with what you actually do and rather focus on one thing. But yeah, it's fine. So then, as I already explained, so some people then started to also look at kind of, okay, how do we actually attribute the costs? And initially that were kind of spreadsheets. And then at some point, some companies came up that said like, okay, yeah, we can actually onboard all the costing, and out of that, together with the install attribution, you can actually make choices on your marketing campaigns, because you can actually see, how much am I actually paying for that single install, and is that actually worth it? And it also does help. That's why I also put the kind of ASO aspect in there. Running these campaigns and looking at keyword-specific activities, especially in kind of search, helps then also define some of the ASO work that you should be doing. What people are doing right now is probably more something like this. So they actually they don't let the decisions happen kind of on the between the cost attribution and the marketing campaigns. They actually say, okay, all the data we want to gather in the data warehouse, and then we make decisions based on the data that we have there. So that will, at the end of the day, define, am I running ROI positive campaigns? Can I segment users that actually need certain CRM triggers and these kind of things? Can I use certain behavior in the in-game analytics to actually also define some of my marketing campaigns? So it makes a lot of sense to actually capture all that information in a data warehouse. And yeah, I mean, just to give you an example, I mean, this is kind of my favorite tech stack, and I deliberately put there at the moment because obviously things change, and there are lots of alternatives. The main thing is if you go with certain service providers, the most important thing is, can I own the data? If you work with companies together that that have wonderful dashboards, but actually you're not getting all the raw data into your own data warehouse. Yeah, that obviously, you're working with them basically comes at a price then. So what I do, for example, is we use a company called Tenjin.io for kind of the marketing campaigns, and they actually do not only the attribution, but also also accumulate all the costs on the campaigns. And from the data that goes into the database, we can also really see, and I'm going to show you some examples, very instantly, okay, how is the ROI of my campaign, of my certain keyword, etc., working? Is it worth increasing the bids there or not? We use Branch for deep links. Makes a lot of sense for us at Lockwood because we have quite some viral users. I love Amplitude as a tool when it comes to kind of in-game analytics, and again, they allow you to basically just push all that information into a database. We use Redshift, but it really doesn't matter. I mean, as long as you own the data. I think that's always the important thing. And for CRM, there are obviously some great companies out there with lots of fancy tools. We just use for kind of push notifications. We use Push-Whoosh, and we do some in-house. Well, we have in-app actually a few kind of what I would call feeds, where we make decisions based on user behavior and then basically display in the app certain activities. But that's kind of more really handmade, in-house built, custom stuff, so to say. But that's kind of a really good tech stack, and it looks quite complex, but it's not. I mean, as I said, it's if I can easily manage all that and even kind of use some queries to get the data that I actually need out of Redshift, I would think that every developer should also kind of look at doing something like that, and not only after years say like, oh yeah, maybe we should capture the advertising, the advertising IDs of the devices, or maybe we should start capturing this or that information. That's far too late. So in practice, how does that look like? I mean, I just put a few things. There are lots more. I just put a few things out there that what it means in practice. So as I explained, one of the important things, at least for me, when I try to kind of grow when it comes to advertising, I want to easily understand kind of how does my campaign ROI look like. Am I running ROI positive campaigns? And that can look as easy as I see exactly my day 0 ROI, my day 1, day 2, day 3, etc. So I've defined certain benchmarks. I know I need to reach a certain percentage, and basically I'm then just tracking against that to decide, okay, what are kind of the overall channels, but then also, then also I can kind of go deeper, as I already said, like on a campaign level, and decide, okay, this campaign works actually really well, or this keyword works actually really well in, let's say, Apple search ads, etc. And I'd rather then increase the bids on specific campaigns and not just on an overall basis. But the important thing is to actually see out of the data actually, how are my campaigns actually performing on a detailed level. Same counts for LTV modeling. So just taking out of the database not a flat ARPDAU, but actually looking at, okay, how does my ARPDAU for my users actually develop over the life cycle of that user. And one of the simplest LTV models is just multiplying the ARPDAU of a cohort with the retention of the cohort to kind of get to an understanding of what is the value of a user after 90 days, after 120 days, after 30 days, whatever, to really also define, what kind of percentage do I want to recoup in a certain period of time. I have done lots of talks on LTV and LTV modeling, and I'm not going to go into details there, but there are some actually quite simple ways to get to some, it's a model, to some assumptions, and then you have to basically validate on the way, am I on track with that? Something else really, really important is finding segments of users based on their behavior, and one database is really, really powerful on that. So I want to, especially when I run lots of Facebook campaigns, I want to not only have a lookalike campaign of paying users, let's say, as an example, but I actually also want to create other segments of users, maybe even negative ones. So I think I have this as an example. Yeah, so I use mode analytics, very cheap, same as all the other things. They're not that expensive. This mode analytics costs like $25 a month, and you can run wonderful queries. And if I can do that, and I'm not an SQL guy, I think many others can do that as well. So I obviously want advertising IDs in a formatted way. And this is, for example, a query for people that actually open my app, but never register, right? These are people that are actually not as valuable, and this is something that I would want to exclude out of my targeting. So that's what I've seen be very successful in some of the Facebook lookalike audience targeting, where you're not only going after 1% of your paying users or 2%, but actually excluding people or lookalikes of people that are not really valuable. Because otherwise you only end up with the same small group of users. You want to find multiple pockets of users and try to create out of behavior either very positive or very negative behavior, groups of users that you want to either include or exclude in your targeting. And that's something where you do need kind of events to track into a database and then create the advertising IDs of those users to have your correct seed audiences. Yeah, and then it's also about keywords, all right? As I said, you can look at it even on a detailed level where you understand, okay, what are kind of certain keywords that actually work really well, and how am I going to use them in, let's say, my Google Play description in order to kind of also capture some of the organic users there. So that's kind of, in a very non-techie way, how I recommend actually to everybody to really use all the data that is there, and be very mindful of who you share data with. So one thing to think about is coming back to kind of your lookalike campaigns. I've seen it very, very many times with people running Facebook campaigns, and they actually share with Facebook because it's very easy and convenient, and Facebook loves you to do that. They share their paying users and how much people then also spend, etc. You can then even in Facebook already see, maybe not on a cohort level, but overall, yeah, I'm running this campaign and this is the money that I'm making from that campaign. Very nice. However, you have to be mindful that the information that you're there sharing, that these are your super valuable users, is obviously also something that everybody else will target. So it's then better to, in an anonymous way, upload advertising and IDs and include them, exclude them out of your sources than even telling Facebook, hey, here is a valuable user. So yeah, I really recommend that you rather only share the data that you really want to share. I think I'm very good in time, and because it's the last session, yeah, I think we have some time for questions. Otherwise, it's cocktails and drinks and all of that. Is that right?
Yep. Thank you very much. Am I on? No, I'm not on. Okay, there we go. Very information. I do have a question actually right away. So you mentioned a bunch of tools that you like to use. And I really like the part where you said that they're not very expensive. So could you just kind of go through the list of things you would recommend that might work well for other people?
Yeah, so I mean, in my setup, for example, so you know, with coming with Tenjin and with, or for example, Amplitude, even on the kind of lower cost tiers. So number one, these are not that expensive, super fancy products, but they usually also already come with a Redshift cluster, or it's a small amount, a few $100s or something like that, that you would have to pay if you're on like a free tier, but you already want to kind of really make sure that you have that data. Right. You can still, usually what happens with, I think with Tenjin and with Amplitude, but I might be wrong, but my understanding it was always that they do capture the data for a certain period of time, but it will, if you then really want to own that, then you have to kind of either go to a tier where you also pay some money, and then you probably have a successful app, or it kind of goes into the nirvana of data.
All right, cool. Do we have any questions from the audience? Yep, over here. Can I try again?
Otherwise, the other mic.
Thank you.
Yes.
Let me think. So you shared experience about analyzing LTV. Let's say I launched hundreds of campaigns, have some KPI. What's your approach about scaling this advertisement, this acquisition? Because LTV might change with time. If you will multiply some channel, it not necessarily will give you the same LTV.
Yeah, that's true. So you have to kind of constantly monitor a channel or a specific campaign. Yes, absolutely. They will. They do change over time, especially if you kind of run quite large, possibly even untargeted campaigns. Maybe initially you have some really good traction, looks good, or you run quite small, and it's kind of just by accident, you know, it's not statistically meaningful enough, etc. So you do have to kind of monitor things really kind of constantly. But what you want, I mean, what you want to do is basically you want to have a tool where you can just quickly go through, okay, this is all fine, or here is kind of a red flag, here is something where I need to do, and you know, once a week or something, you will look for, okay, where are actually opportunities? Where are opportunities in certain markets? Where are opportunities in certain campaigns to basically also scale? And at the end of the day, I mean, that's a slightly different topic, but yeah, you want to, I mean, I like to do something as really efficient as possible, so I don't believe in kind of big UA and marketing teams. I don't see value in kind of spreadsheet marketing. I think the big levers at the end of the day are very often kind of targeting and creatives. And if you get that right, then you have good chances. Then you can also run campaigns for quite a while. But yeah, that's. I'm not sure that exactly answered the question, but I hope it did a bit.
Cool. Anyone else? Any questions or? Oh, yep. Back there. Well, you want to do the honors?
Thanks. Hi, quick one. So, how do you pull in all the CPI data and the cost data into the model?
Sorry, I didn't.
How do you pull all the campaign CPI data into the model? Is that coming through the attribution, or is
yeah? So there are a few tools that allow you to basically. They have basically developed the integrations with all those different networks. So Tenjin is one of them. Singular is one of them, and I'm sure there are probably quite a few others. But at the end of the day, you need to be able to kind of attribute that cost data also, obviously with the attributed installs.
Yeah.
There will always be a little bit of a discrepancy. That's fine. We can all live with that. It's data at the end of the day. But yeah, that allows you to then also see, okay, against the ROI in terms of in-app purchases and ad revenues, which is also always a bit blurry. Don't get me wrong there. But it's never 100% accurate. I mean, in-app purchases are based on a user, advertising revenues not necessarily. but you at least start to get a feel of, okay, am I roughly on track? And I usually give myself like a window, especially early on. I say like, okay, if I need to reach like on day one 85% of my cost, so that I recoup 15% and I'm at minus 85%, I would say like, if it's somewhere between or up to kind of only 10% that I recoup, I would still keep it running, but obviously that window needs to go smaller and smaller to kind of reach my ROI goal. If that's like 90 days or 120 days, every company is a bit different there. But yeah, so there are some tools that allow you to just pull in all that cost and spend data. Yeah.
Great. So Oliver, are you going to be around after the presentation? So my recommendation to all of you is if you have any growth hacking questions, now would be a great time to go harass this man because he really knows this stuff really extremely well. So I think with that, thank you so much. Very, very insightful. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.